out on the range today, so please bear with gunfire here in the background. Today we're talking about the FN57. Why? I've discussed and demonstrated it on several previous occasions. Because recently some people pointed out that I've never shot the meat target with it and requested that I do so. And for those who haven't seen it, the meat target is leather jacket skin followed by a pork steak pectoral, pork ribs, a watermelon to simulate lung tissue, and more pork ribs on the back. And it's an analog for a thoracic shot on the intended target. Now, for the 5.7, I've explained it on several previous occasions, so I'm going to give a very abbreviated explanation of it today. According to what I read, it weighs 19 ounces. It's a single-action, hammerless autoloader with an ambidextrous trigger finger activated safety. You can work it from either side. When you buy this pistol, it comes with 3 20-shot magazines, and aftermarket 30-shot magazines are available, and it's caliber 5.7 by 28. What's that? Let me show you a close-up of the ammunition. On your left is a 45 ACP, on your right a 9 by 19, and in the center the 5.7 by 28. The 5.7 by 28 is a small caliber high velocity cartridge, and in that ongoing debate between velocity and mass there are extremists. Some people think it's absolutely the best way to go to have small caliber light projectile propelled at very high velocities, and those people tend to like 5.7 by 28. On the other end of that spectrum there are people that think you need a very large caliber heavy projectile propelled at lower velocities, and those people really tend to like 45 ACP. In talking about which one is really more powerful, and the debate goes on, you measure velocity using a chronograph, but to talk about what is more powerful, not necessarily more effective, but more powerful, you typically use a unit called energy foot-pounds, which is derived at using a mathematical formula that takes into account the mass and velocity of a projectile. If you have 2 projectiles of very different weight and propel them at the same velocity, the heavier one will have more energy foot-pounds. But it is possible to propel a much lighter projectile enough faster that it will have more energy foot-pounds than a heavier one. And there are people who claim that the 5.7 by 28 when fired from an FN57 is just as powerful as a 45 ACP fired from a 1911. Is that true? Let's go to the chronograph and collect some data, crunch some numbers, and see if we can shed any light on that. And we'll start with a Colt government model with Remington UMC 45 ACP 230 grain full metal jacket round nose. $796, $793, $769, $796, and $801. Now let's see how that compares to the 5.7. Now with the FN57, I'm going to use this FN SS197 SR ammunition, which is a 40 grain projectile that's like a ballistic tip. $1706, $1708, $1664, $1719, and $1711. Let's crunch the numbers. Well, I crunched the numbers, and for our 5.7 I got a mean velocity of 1,701. As where with the 45 I got 791. That's 910 feet per second more. But in terms of energy foot-pounds, if I did my math right, for the 5.7 I got 257, and for the 45 I got 319. That's 62 pounds more. Is that a lot more? Maybe. We also have to take into consideration that for the 45 I was using this UMC ammunition, which is just target ammo, and is pretty far down on the list of power as far as 45 ammo goes. While for the 5.7 I was using this FN ammunition, which is quite a bit higher up the scale in terms of power. So even giving the 5.7 an advantage, it still comes up a little bit short. But how much difference would 62 energy foot-pounds make especially when we're comparing two extremes of light and fast versus heavy and slow. Let me see if I can come up with a demonstration that'll illustrate that. These are $2 concrete blocks, and I'll go back 10 yards and I'll shoot the target on your left with 45 ACP Remington UMC 230 grain full metal jacket, and I'll shoot the target on your right with 5.7 by 28. But since the 45 is full metal jacket, I'll switch ammunition and I'll use this Federal American Eagle 5.7 by 28 40 grain full metal jacket ammunition. So that was 14 rounds versus 30. So velocity matters, but it looks like mass and energy foot-pounds matter too. One of the concerns with light, small caliber, high velocity projectiles is that you'll either get insufficient or excessive penetration. So I've got two meat targets set up in tandem, each one covered with 4 layers of t-shirt on the front, 4 layers on the back, and the second one followed by the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop. And I'll go back 7 yards and shoot this direction with the FN57 loaded with the Federal American Eagle 40 grain full metal jacket projectiles. And let's see how much damage we do to our intended target and how much damage, if any, is suffered by our innocent bystander. Well, our full metal jacket ammunition put holes in our pork steak pectoral and put holes in the ribs in the front, put holes in the ribs in the back, but didn't really do much damage. However, it does seem to have chewed up our watermelon lung tissue pretty well. Now, as far as our innocent bystander, it only got hit with one shot. And that shot did not go through the skin or the pork steak pectoral. It was just a flesh wound that only hit the watermelon. So this doesn't really tell us much. So I'll set this whole thing up again and I'll shoot it with our 40 grain ballistic tip ammunition and see what we can learn from it. Now we've got our intended target and our innocent bystander a little closer together, and hopefully that'll give us some better results. And I'm going to use this FN SS198 LF ammunition. That's a lead-free 27 grain hollow point. Now we got some interesting results. Here's the ribs on the front of the target and just put holes in there. But on the back, these holes are elongated. These projectiles are already starting to tumble. We see a lot of damage to our watermelon lung tissue. Only one projectile made it to the ribs on the back of the target and did not penetrate. And of course, none hit our innocent bystander. Let's try one more type of ammunition. And now we'll shoot our FN SS197 SR ammunition, which is loaded with a Hornady 40 grain VMAX projectile, similar to a ballistic tip. Well, our 40 grain VMAX projectiles made bigger holes in the ribs on the front of the target, did a lot of damage to our watermelon lung tissue. 3 of them hit the ribs on the back, 1 went through and was stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target, and again, none hit our innocent bystander. So as far as these light hypervelocity rounds having excessive penetration, that doesn't seem to be a big concern. Now let's take a close-up look at all these projectiles. Our bottom row is our 40 grain full metal jacket, and one deformed a little bit. Our middle row is the lead-free 27 grain hollow points, and these are hollow points, but only one has the slightest deformation. Our top row is the 40 grain VMAX projectiles. Here's one of the polymer tips. You can see one lost its jacket and there was some fragmentation, and there's some inconsistent expansion. And I only recovered 3 of the projectiles. And there you have it, the FN57 versus the meat target. Now there's a couple of things I want to add, and fair warning, this is the boring part of the video where I talk. And what can I say about the 5.7 or the 5.7 by 28 cartridge that I haven't already said? Not much, so I'll try to be brief. First, there are a lot of people who will tell you the 5.7 by 28 is overwhelmingly powerful. Well, based on today's meat target results and the results I've gotten while deer hunting, I've shot 3 deer with this pistol, I can tell you that for shooting large animals, 5.7 by 28 does not compare favorably with other handgun cartridges like 38 Super Automatic, 357 Magnum, or 45 ACP. Also, for most of us, in most situations, the 5.7 pistol is not going to be as practical as something like your Glock in caliber 40 Smith & Wesson, or my Beretta 9mm, or my Colt 45. However, this pistol in this caliber does have some features which can be practical for some people, such as with a muzzle velocity of 1,700 plus feet per second, even more when you load with the 27 grain projectiles, it can be a very flat shooting long range pistol. Also, the gun itself is light and the ammunition is light and compact. And when you load this pistol with the 40 grain blue tip VMAX bullet like a ballistic tip, it will shoot through 3A body armor like it's not even there. Then there's the feature of when you buy this pistol, it comes with 3 20-shot magazines. Aftermarket 30-shot magazines are readily available, and unlike some extended magazines that are really extended, this does not stick out the bottom of the grip all that much, and although it may not be all that practical for concealed carry, for open carry in the field, these magazines aren't obtrusive at all. Now, how can those features be practical? Well, when a convenience store is robbed, it's usually by one perpetrator. When an armored car is robbed, there can be 2, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 perpetrators, and sometimes they're wearing body armor. So if you're an armored car driver, a 20-shot pistol that can shoot through body armor might be the right gun for you. If you're a long-range bicyclist or a long-range backpacker, space inside your pack and weight are very real concerns, and it might be the right gun for you. If you have a 3-day survival pack and part of that pack is a gun, and you envision a scenario where you might have to evacuate on foot, again, space and weight are very real concerns, and it might be the right gun for you. If you envision a scenario where you might have to use your handgun to shoot at a target that's 100 or 150 yards away, it might be the right gun for you. Now here's where I have to introduce a group of people. In the past I've talked about the What If Brigade. Well, this is the That Won't Happen Battalion, also known as the You'd Never Really Do That Battalion. Sometimes when I do presentations and I shoot handguns at 50 yards, people from this group will sometimes very angrily and sometimes profanely criticize me for doing that because you'd never really shoot a handgun at that distance. Never? Recently I did a presentation comparing pump and auto-loading shotguns, and part of the comparison is doing a select slug drill. And someone told me in so many words that that was superfluous because you'd never really do that. Yes, I have done that. Now granted, he was talking about the narrow scope of anti-personnel application, and I've done it while hunting. But the real thing I can say to those people is that if you live in an apartment building in Baltimore, and you've never been west of the Mississippi, and you've never seen, let alone shot, a coyote, you don't have much cause to tell a Wyoming cowboy what kind of gun he needs, or vice versa. So the real bottom line is that although the FN57 is not practical for most of us, it is a niche handgun, and some people fit that niche. So, as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the 5.7 versus the meat target video.